I should have known something was wrong the moment we pulled up to that cabin. It was Friday evening, late fall, and the mountains stretched out around us, dark and endless. My girlfriend, Emily, had found the place online, a rustic little getaway, the kind of cabin that promised peace, fresh air, and a break from our phones. She'd been excited about it all week. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, she'd said with a grin. Just us and nature. And at first I agreed. The listing had shown a cozy wood cabin with a porch, a fireplace, and trails nearby. It sounded perfect. But when we finally arrived, the place looked different. The trees pressed right up against the cabin, their branches clawing at the roof. The porch sagged under our weight, and the windows were so clouded you couldn't see through them. And then there was the silence. No birds, no rustling animals, not even the distant hum of power lines. Just nothing. The owner had left the key under a rock near the steps. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of mold and wood smoke, as if someone had burned green logs years ago and never aired it out. The furniture was basic: a couch, a wooden table, 2 chairs. The only light came from a few oil lamps, since there was no electricity. No signal either, Emily said, holding up her phone. She wasn't surprised, she actually seemed pleased. Told you, it's a detox weekend. I forced a smile. Yeah, great. We unpacked, lit the fireplace, and made a simple dinner. By the time night fell, the forest outside had turned pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows everything. Even with the fire burning, I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were leaning closer to the windows, as if listening. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it clearly, the sound of a door opening. It wasn't loud, more like a slow creak of wood, but it came from inside the cabin. I sat up, heart hammering, and glanced at Emily, still asleep, her breathing steady. The front door was locked. I'd checked it twice before bed. Grabbing the oil lamp, I crept into the main room. The shadows flickered across the walls, stretching into strange shapes. That's when I saw it. The front door stood slightly open, swaying on its hinges. I froze. I was sure I had locked it. I remembered turning the key, sliding the bolt. My skin crawled. I stepped toward it cautiously, every creak of the floor echoing too loud. Just as I reached for the handle, a low growl rumbled behind me. I spun around. It was Max, the owner's old German shepherd. The guy had told us the dog wandered the property and liked to keep visitors company. Max was standing at the edge of the open door, hackles raised, teeth bared, growling into the forest beyond the porch. "Easy, boy," I whispered. But Max didn't even glance at me. His eyes were locked on the tree line, unblinking. The woods were silent. Too silent. I shut the door quickly, bolting it, and Max whined low in his throat, pacing back and forth. I stood there in the dim light, straining to hear something, anything, but there was nothing. Just the thick, oppressive silence. Eventually, Max settled near the door, lying down but still alert, ears twitching at every sound I couldn't hear. I barely slept after that. Emily didn't believe me when I told her. "You probably forgot to lock it," she said over breakfast, brushing crumbs off the table. "I didn't," I insisted. "I remember turning the key. And Max, he knew something was out there." She rolled her eyes. "Dogs bark at squirrels." But when we stepped outside that morning, I finally had proof. On the porch just in front of the door were footprints. Bare feet, human. Large, flat impressions pressed into the thin layer of dirt and pine needles that covered the boards. The toes were splayed, the arches deep. I knelt down, tracing one with my fingers. "Emily, look at this." Someone was here. She leaned closer, frowning. "Weird, but maybe it's from the owner." I shook my head. "They're fresh. These weren't here last night." Then something else hit me. The prints weren't just dirty, they were muddy. Dark, wet soil smeared across the porch. But the ground around the cabin was dry, dusty, not muddy at all. Emily noticed it too. Where the hell would mud even come from? The trails are all pine needles and rocks. Exactly. Unless I remembered something the owner had mentioned casually when I booked the place. Something about a marshy valley 2 miles down the ridge. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now my stomach tightened. Whoever had left those footprints had walked barefoot, at night, all the way from that valley, through the woods, in the cold, and they had come straight to our cabin. That day, Emily tried to brush it off. We went hiking, made lunch, pretended everything was normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about those prints. Every snapped twig in the woods made me jump. By nightfall, my nerves were raw. I checked the locks 3 times, barricaded the windows with chairs, even kept the fireplace poker by the bed. Emily teased me for being paranoid, but when Max planted himself by the door again, growling low, she stopped laughing. Around 2 a.m., the sound came back. Not the door this time. Knocking. 3 slow knocks on the wooden wall, right beneath the bedroom window. I froze. Emily sat bolt upright, eyes wide in the dim firelight. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, clutching my arm. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I crept toward the window, holding my breath. The glass was fogged, but beyond it, the woods loomed black and endless. I couldn't see anything. Max barked suddenly, sharp and furious, launching at the door. The knocking stopped. For the rest of the night, we didn't sleep. By dawn, I was ready to leave. I didn't care about the money we'd spent, didn't care if Emily was disappointed. Something was out there, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what. But when I opened the door, my stomach dropped. The porch was covered, absolutely covered in muddy footprints. Not just one set this time. Dozens. Bare feet, different sizes, overlapping, circling the cabin like a swarm. They led from the forest around the porch back into the trees. Emily gasped, "Oh my God." I crouched, touching the mud. It was cold, slick, and it wasn't from here. The soil was darker, heavier, like swamp mud, from that valley. Someone, or something, had walked miles through the night to surround our cabin, watching, waiting. We packed in 10 minutes flat. By the time the sun broke over the trees, we were already driving down the mountain, Max barking in the back seat like he knew we were running from something real. I never looked back. I didn't need to, because deep down, I knew if I did, I'd see someone standing barefoot in the trees, watching us leave. We were 6 friends, young and reckless, eager for adventure. The plan was simple. Spend 4 days trekking and climbing through the Northern Ridge, one of the most isolated mountain trails in the state. The area was known for its beauty, and for the fact that hardly anyone went there anymore. That was exactly why we chose it. It was late summer when we set out, backpacks heavy with gear, ropes coiled neatly, tents rolled tight. The air was crisp, the forest dense, and every step upward carried us farther from cell service, farther from civilization. By the first afternoon, we were high enough to see the valley spread out beneath us. The sunlight stretched long across the trees, and spirits were high. That's when we saw him. At first, I thought he was just another hiker. He sat alone on a boulder about 50 yards away, knees drawn to his chest, watching us with unreadable eyes. His clothes were shredded, his pants torn at the knees, and his jacket was so filthy it was hard to tell its original color. In his lap was a backpack, not one of ours, but not a hiker's pack either. It looked cheap, frayed, out of place among our technical gear. He was eating from it with his bare hands, stuffing something into his mouth quickly, as if afraid it would be taken away. We slowed, uneasy. Nobody spoke at first. Finally, my friend Chris muttered, "What the hell is he doing out here dressed like that?" "Maybe he's lost," said Jenna, ever the optimist. "Or maybe he's watching us," I whispered, because I couldn't shake the way his eyes followed us. We tried to keep walking, pretending not to notice. When I glanced back a minute later, he was still sitting there, but the food was gone and he was just staring. By evening, we pitched our tents near the tree line. The sun had dipped behind the ridge, leaving a cold, bluish light. We ate quickly, joking to push away the unease, but I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Maybe he's some mountain hermit, Chris said. Probably harmless. Then why did it look like he was eating out of someone else's bag? I shot back. No one had an answer. By 10, everyone had gone quiet. The woods pressed in heavy and dark, the only sound the occasional snap of a twig. I drifted in and out of sleep until a sound pulled me fully awake. A faint chirp. At first I thought it was the wind against the tent, but then it came again. Chirp, chirp. A slow, deliberate tearing sound. My pulse quickened. Someone was cutting fabric. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Jenna, who was in the sleeping bag beside me. She sat up, eyes wide. The sound grew clearer, right outside. I grabbed my headlamp and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness just as something peeled back the corner of the tent. A long slit had been cut into the nylon. I froze, staring at the pale hand still clutching a knife. The second the light hit it, the hand withdrew. Fast. "Hey!" Chris shouted from his tent. He'd heard it too. Other beams of light snapped on, sweeping wildly across the camp. But the man was gone. Only the torn flap of our tent swayed in the cold air, the knife marks jagged and fresh. None of us slept after that. We sat huddled in a circle, lamps burning low, waiting for dawn. Every rustle of leaves set our nerves on edge. When the first light crept through the trees, we did a quick check of our camp. That's when we realized a bag was missing. It wasn't one of the gear bags. Our ropes, helmets, and harnesses were untouched. But David's pack, the one with half our food and water, was gone. At first, we thought maybe an animal dragged it off. But the ground told another story. Boot prints, human, leading away from camp and vanishing into the forest. "He took it," Jenna said quietly. Chris cursed. Unbelievable. He waited until we were asleep and just what? I snapped. Cut into our tents? Sneak around with a knife? That guy isn't just some lost hiker. He's dangerous. No one argued. The question now was whether to pack up and leave or keep going. The problem was, turning back wasn't simple. The ridge trail was steep and retracing it would take longer than pushing ahead to the next route down. But we had less food now, less water. We argued for an hour before deciding to push forward. None of us liked the idea of hiking back toward where he might be, but the unease never left. The second day was harder. We were tired, jumpy, constantly checking over our shoulders. The forest seemed thicker, every shadow a threat. By mid-afternoon, Chris froze on the trail. "Look," he hissed. There, on a branch, hung David's water bottle. It dangled by its strap, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Why would it be here?" Jenna whispered. "It's a warning," I said. "He wants us to know he's following." Nobody wanted to admit it, but we all knew it was true. We were being hunted. That night we pitched camp earlier, trying to fortify the tents, piling rocks around them like makeshift barriers. Max, the quietest of our group, suggested we take shifts staying awake. So we did. I had the second watch. At around 2 a.m., while the others slept, I sat clutching a flashlight, eyes darting between the trees. For a long time there was nothing. Then, just past the glow of the dying fire, I saw movement. A figure, standing perfectly still between two pines. I raised the light, and there he was. The strange man, clothed in tatters, face shadowed by matted hair. He wasn't holding the knife, but I knew it was somewhere close. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me, unblinking. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, to wake the others, but something in his eyes pinned me where I sat. It felt less like looking at a man and more like an animal deciding whether to strike. Finally, he stepped backward into the dark, vanishing without a sound. I didn't sleep a second after that. By morning, the group was fraying. Everyone was scared, exhausted, and angry. We moved faster, speaking little, driven only by the thought of getting off that mountain. But the signs kept coming. A piece of rope cut and left dangling on the trail. An empty food wrapper that had been inside David's stolen pack, always placed where we'd see it. He wanted us to know he was close. That night, none of us slept. We sat with the fire burning high, weapons in hand, knives, trekking poles, even rocks. Every crack of branches set us on edge. But he never showed himself again. On the fourth day, we finally reached the end of the trail, stumbling back toward a ranger station at the edge of the forest. The sight of that wooden building nearly brought me to tears. We told the ranger everything. The torn tents, the missing pack, the man we'd seen. He listened carefully, then shook his head. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "People report seeing someone like that out here every couple of years. A drifter, maybe. A squatter. Some say he lives off what hikers leave behind. Others say he used to be a climber who lost his mind out here years ago and never came back down." "Why doesn't anyone stop him?" Chris demanded. The ranger sighed. "We've looked, never found him. By the time we go searching, he's gone. And the forest out here, it hides things." We left shaken, our relief at being safe battling with the memory of that stare in the night. Even now I can't forget it. Because when I close my eyes, I see him, standing just beyond the firelight, waiting for the moment when the forest finally swallows me too. I live in an old apartment building downtown, the kind of place that feels like it's holding its breath. The walls are yellowed with age, the floorboards groan under every step, and the smell, a mix of dust, damp plaster, and old wood, never leaves, no matter how many windows you open. Most of the apartments are empty. People moved out years ago and never came back. On my floor there are only 2 units, mine and the one across the hall, which had been vacant for more than a decade. I'd grown used to the silence. In fact, silence was the very thing I liked most about living there. When you live in a building that's more empty than full, every sound becomes magnified. Even a footstep in the hallway could feel like thunder in your chest. But about a month ago, something changed. I came home late one evening and noticed that the door across from mine wasn't the same. It had always been this old, splintered wooden door, the paint chipped and peeling. Suddenly, it had been replaced by something new, heavy metal, dark gray with a massive peephole that looked almost like an unblinking eye. No movers, no workmen, no noise. Just one day, an old wooden door, the next this new hulking slab of metal. I thought maybe the landlord had finally rented it out. That would have made sense. But there'd been no ad, no for rent sign, and no one ever brought furniture inside. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. The first few nights after that, I started hearing things. At first, just soft noises, a shuffle of feet, the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Always late at night, always when the rest of the building seemed dead. But the strange thing was, I never once saw anyone go in or out. No moving truck, no people, no furniture carried up the stairs. Even the neighbors on the floors above and below swore they hadn't seen anyone. One night around 1 a.m, I was climbing the stairwell after work. Halfway up, I felt it, like someone was behind me. I hurried to my door, fumbled with my keys, and slipped inside. Before shutting it, I glanced through my peephole. That's when I noticed it for the first time. A faint glow, like a pale light seeping out from under the new door across the hall. I told myself it was nothing. A lamp maybe, a candle, anything ordinary. But things didn't stop. A week later, I found something waiting for me outside my door. A plain white envelope. No name, no stamp, no handwriting on the outside. Just left there, like a forgotten bill. I carried it inside, half expecting it to be junk mail. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in neat block letters. Stop looking through the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. I hardly ever used the peephole. Why would anyone think I was watching? Unless they had been watching me. The next morning, I went downstairs to the doorman, old Hussein, who'd been at the front desk longer than I'd lived there. I asked casually, "Do you know who moved into the unit across from mine?" He frowned at me. "Nobody. That apartment's been empty for years," I pressed. "What about the new door?" He shrugged. I didn't see anyone replace it. That didn't make sense. He was always there. Always. That night I decided to watch. I turned off my lights, pressed my eye to the peephole, and waited. The hallway stretched out in silence, stale air heavy with dust. After half an hour, I heard it, a faint click. My skin prickled. The door across the hall opened, slowly, carefully. But no one stepped out. The hallway was empty, completely empty. And then, the sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, coming closer. My breath caught. The steps stopped directly in front of my door. I froze, eye pressed to the peephole. I couldn't see anyone. Nothing but the dim light of the hallway, but I could hear breathing, right on the other side, and then, so soft I almost thought I imagined it, a whisper at my door. I know you're standing there. My blood turned to ice. I stumbled back from the door, heart hammering, waiting for a knock, a rattle, a crash. But nothing happened. After a minute, the footsteps receded, fading down the hall. The next day when I came home, there was a chalk mark on my door, a crude X, 2 slanted lines drawn like a warning. I wiped it off, hands shaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever, or whatever, was inside that apartment was watching me. I went to the landlord himself, desperate for answers. He kept the building's records in a cramped little office on the ground floor. "Who's renting the apartment across from me?" I demanded. He flipped through his ledger. "Nobody. It's empty." "Empty?" I snapped. "There's a new door. There are noises. Someone left me a note." The landlord stared at me flatly. "You're mistaken. That unit hasn't been occupied for years." I left his office more unsettled than ever. Either he was lying, or I was losing my mind. That night I woke at 2 a.m. to a sound I'll never forget. 3 slow knocks, not at my door, on the wall that separated my bedroom from the apartment across the hall. Knock, knock, knock. A long pause, then again. Knock, knock, knock. It sounded deliberate, like a code. I stood frozen in bed, sweat soaking my shirt. Finally, I shouted, voice shaking, "Who are you? What do you want?" Silence. For a long moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Then came the reply, muffled but unmistakable. "I'm the one who lives across from you, and I've been watching you every night."